Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. This is a podcast with editors and besties as we discuss books, not as readers, but as writers, to draw inspiration from great books and a lot of laughs. This month, we are discussing K.F. Breene's Sin and Magic. And if you've been around, what's up? If you are new, welcome. But we've talked about this series before, which is The Demigods of San Francisco. It's a paranormal romance series by K.F. Breene. And we did book 1 last year. And now we're coming back around for our first book 2 in this second year of our podcast. And so before we get into all the yumminess when it comes to characters in this episode, let's go ahead and catch up with Rachel over at Story Cypher. What do you got going on, girl?
Hello. So today we have a writing update.
Okay.
This writing update is going to be all about how slow I am. So if anybody's wondering, I just thought you would like to know. I know I put on my power stance and I was like, I move very slow. It was really just going for an exercise in juxtaposition here.
And it's working.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed. So I thought I'd share a quick writing update since, I started this project and I was working alongside my students in the original cohort. I recorded my whole process live. I'm sorry, I recorded it live and then edited it for the students so they didn't spend 4 hours watching me stare at my screen and be like, I don't know what to put here. Just to clarify. And I used that to get started on a project. And I, again, was sort of like showing them a project from start to finish. So I'm still giving them updates on the project. So I'm kind of showing them the revision process from my perspective. So by the time this comes out, I'm hoping right now I'm wrapping up Act 1. So by the time this episode actually comes out, I should be into Act 2 of what is essentially my final draft, just like line revisions and more minor changes. So this should be the kind of like last major drafting phase for me as the book is starting to take its like full and final shape. Which is really exciting. But I'm going to tell our dear listeners now, again, everybody writes at a different pace. Dana does not write at the same pace as me. She's rocking and rolling over there. Okay. I'm slow writers club over here. So just for anybody who's wondering,
I'm a slow writer too, until I warm up. I'm super slow.
Maybe I just never warm up. I don't know. Maybe I'll never warm up. But this being my first full like novel as well, or was a novella, but like I go into it knowing that like my process is going to be, until I am fully settled in my own process, the way that I like to do things, the way that I like approach individual scenes and acts, and just like my sort of personal way of doing things, for me, it's slower as I sort of work out those details for myself. So it takes me about a weekend to do a scene. So now when I say a weekend, right, we're talking, I write generally, accepting scheduling changes, Friday through Monday, and I do about 2.5 hours each day of those 4 days, which means it takes me about 10 hours to get a final draft, like fully the way that I want it, of one scene. 10 hours per scene is what it's taken over here. And I mean, it is desperately meticulous work where I am like, okay, I need to get from point A to point B. And like, there's like this evolution of like, okay, well, we have to get from understanding to acceptance to like, and that's just the way that like my mind like works on a scene. That's how long it takes me. But the work is getting done, and the story is like moving forward.
How are you feeling about like you've given us the update and sort of the realization of where you are, and this is just how you work in acceptance, but how are you feeling about it, like about where you are in the process at this time and against where you thought you would be?
Yeah, so I definitely I wish it went faster, but I think it's very specific to me because of what I had done the previous 6 months. And again, with the between the workload and the writing, like I verged on hurting myself, right? Because of the speed at which everything was moving. And so I wish that I was moving fast. Like, would it be nice to move faster? Yes, but I'm still sort of bouncing back from having really done a number on my both my mental and my physical well-being by driving that hard during that season. And so and the thing too is like the scenes are coming out like the way that I actually picture the story. Like it
Mm.
feels like, oh, this is the thing that I wanted it to be. It is actually, and so that really tempers that. Again, I guess I wish it moved faster, but also when I see the scenes and they look to me just about the way they're going to look when it's published, that's very, very sad. Like, that's very satisfying because it's like all of that work that I did is like I'm seeing it pay off in that more final form.
Well, I'm excited for you and I'm proud of you. Um, I think it's going to be so interesting, like just seeing you continue and the fact that you started it with your students and you're continuing until you get it to a place where you feel like this is where I want it to be. Because at the end of the day, until you go through all those steps and you internalize it for yourself in real time, like it's all just theory. There are so many different ways that you could have done this, but now that you've done it, there's just a whole different level of appreciation for the creative process and figuring out what works for you to get you to that place.
And I think there's something to be said. I'll just like hit this briefly, and then I want to know what else you got going on over there. But I think one of those things that's like worth just sort of like observing again when I talk to my writers, when I talk to my students, when I think about the academy and what it is and what it's designed for, is like we are human beings cultivating a creative life. And so that
Hmm.
means a creative life through all seasons. When you are busy,
Hmm.
what does creativity look like? When things slow down, what does creativity look like? And creating a creative life that not only can ride those waves because life changes and moves around and stuff happens, and but also doing it in a way that's sustainable, right? So
Hmm.
again, for me, I in a way I almost set myself backwards. So while my students had 6 months to work, I had to do basically all the same work that they did in about 3 months because of having to teach and then do the work and teach and do the work and teach, right? The way that kind of like worked out. And that was not a sustainable pace for me, right? Like that. So
Hmm.
what I ended up doing was by going that hard, the result, I'm really happy with the result, right? Like what it did for the academy, what it did for the students, being able to open up that process with them was amazing. But for me creatively, it kind of set me backwards because I like burned myself to the ground. I got sick for like 2.5 weeks, and that was like time that I lost, and then you're trying to make back time for like your work. And so what it did in the aggregate was in some ways kind of like set me backwards and slow me down overall. And the reason I talk about that is because sometimes when we feel in a hurry, or when we feel like we're not moving fast enough, or any number of sort of like things that can happen to us in our minds about our creative process and about the progress we're making, like we want to create sustainable rhythms so that we don't burn
Hmm.
ourselves out, so that we don't hurt ourselves, because that will actually set us back in the long term. And that's essentially what I did to myself. So I have a great baseline for my story, but then I lost about a month worth of work because of what happened on the other side of that nonstop work. Now my students all were able to do it with, they had the full month and they didn't burn themselves out. They're doing great. I hurt myself. And so that just, I think I want to talk about those things and bring those things up because it's so easy to feel like, oh, I should do more faster. I'm just going to work super hard all the time, or any of those things. And if you're not thinking about how it fits into your whole life and creating a sustainable rhythm, you can, again, set yourself backwards. And so learning from my mistakes a little bit of like, look, I did this and then I hurt myself and then it slowed me down, and now I have to move more slowly, because I'm still sort of coming back from what I inflicted on myself by choosing to do it in that way. I think those are just important things to remember, is that creativity doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in context to your whole entire life. And you want a practice that can ride those ebbs and flows of your life and not hurt yourself along the way. So
Man,
that's my
you
takeaway.
listen, you should have been in our retreat because that's what we talked about. Okay. But
Oh,
no,
see
that's
what?
exactly because we make goals and we don't think about you have to think about the time that you're in,
Yeah.
what that actual goal is and what it means to the season that you're in your life.
Hmm.
And honestly, as somebody who's been through that, everybody has you have to learn that. You can say
Yep.
it, but until people know, you don't understand what levers are your levers until you go. A lot of times you got to go beyond it to be able to pull back and say, okay, this is where my pace of being um productive but also still living life, and this is why I'm so adamant about scheduling, time blocking, and making sure
Hmm.
that you are on your list. A
Yep.
lot of times the reason why your loudest cheerleaders for that are because they know what it's like when you don't do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like now
Absolutely.
you know you I mean and now listen, that's one of those moments where it's just not talk, it's lived
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of those things that's like part of creativity, is a lot of it is learning the hard way, right? And you
Exactly.
sort of like, again, to your point, you sort of like don't know until until you sort of like overextended yourself and you're like, ooh, and then you sort of like feel the rubber band snap back and you're like, all right, I'm not gonna make that mistake again. Now I know, you know.
And we try not to, but Lord knows stuff happens. But I mean,
Sometimes.
yeah, exactly. Yep. It's
Okay,
part of
so
the
besides
game.
being a more integrated person with better creative rhythms and a more sustainable lifestyle than we're living over here, sort of, I don't know, sometimes you tell me about your
Girl,
schedule and I'm like,
girl,
maybe it's not just
exactly.
me. What do you got going on over at Day Details? What's new?
I think it's funny that you were talking about this, and what I put down is like, can I just hide in the corner with a book? That's what I put down for my small talk because that's what I've been feeling.
Yeah.
I just want to hide in a corner and by myself and read a book. And I think part of what you're talking about right here is like the creative process, but also, you have that creative process, and the other part that you said but you didn't say, the fact that this is also what you do. And so mixing that with also being the thing that you love reading, and you right.
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm in a season of having that, and just I'm working on the nonfiction book, and writing the newsletter, doing the podcast, teaching, and I'm just like, can
Man.
I just sit in a corner with a book? Can I just
Yeah.
sit on the couch and be invisible?
Just, yeah.
And so it's not even a whole lot of an update other than just learning that it's a season, and then you have days where it's just like, this is exactly why I do this. Oh my god, this I
Yeah.
love this so much. And then other days of like, oh my god, can we tap out? Or another day of like, is it too soon to crash out? Right?
Yep.
And it's like all of those things, but it builds for an overall perspective in some amazing aha. So I'll give a
Mhm.
couple and then we can jump into our discussion today. One of the ahas that came off like of the heels of the boot camp, and one of the things was like this appreciation for people think their story is about one thing, but what they put on the paper sometimes is something totally different.
Yeah.
Right. And you normally experience that. But when I'm experiencing things when it comes to coaching, I'm not always coaching from the documents. We're in conversation.
Hmm.
Right. And then when I'm working with someone as the editor, the conversation is the manuscript. But that experience, like we're smack dab in the middle, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
talking to you and then I'm looking at the thing and I'm like, wait a minute, these are
Hmm.
not the same thing. And so it's like this understanding of like making sure of what it's like to ensure that like what you're doing is what you're putting on the page. And how a lot of times asking the right questions really comes down to they think they have, but it's because it lives so vividly in their head that
Yeah.
it hasn't quite gone through the fingers and reached the
Hmm.
page. And so
Yeah.
that was has been a really, well, like, and it's like the reality is like you know that and you see it, but in the pressure cooker, it's sort of
Mhm.
like a flashlight
Yeah.
on it, and it's like, oh, this is what we're dealing with. This is you're feeling the effects of that,
Yeah.
sort of missing the mark on that. So that's the first thing. The other thing has been the whole thing of the creative journey, in a sense that kind of like what you're experiencing the side of showing up to be a creative in the midst of your real life and
Mhm.
your real schedule that is a lot busier and more demanding than you realize.
Mhm.
Right? You know it because it's kind of like neat on a paper or in a planner. But when
Yeah.
you add in, okay, I want to write this book,
Yeah.
the realness of it is for real, real.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
feel the mental tax on everything else that you do when you show up
Everything.
to your creative session and you're like, "Ooh, I've used a lot of mental energy this week. What do we have left in the tank?"
Nothing. And then you're like, okay. And then you just try to soup it up with coffee and just like thug it out. And your body is
Yep.
like, I didn't sign up for this. So there's that side, but then there's also the side that I'm getting more acquainted with because it's been like a degree of separation, which is it's also the reason why a lot of people don't. Right? We
Mhm.
usually see the don't of it as being that people want to do it, but life gets in the way or other obligations sort of get in the way. But the other part of it is like I don't have the bandwidth for it, or
Mhm.
maybe I'm not cut out for it because I don't have the capacity to do that and that and that and that. Sometimes like how
Mhm.
you kind of tease with me, but actually you do. You're making a choice whether you do or you don't, and it's at a
Mhm.
different degree, but it's
Mhm.
it's the same muscle, just
Yeah.
exercised in a different way. And so it becomes this thing of like, how as a coach am I communicating that, and how am I showing up and being
Mhm.
able to recognize that these things are a symptom of that?
Mhm.
Because the reality becomes, or at least I think it is, the reality then turns into the fact that I believe people don't do it, or the lived experience doesn't match the fantasy of it,
Yeah.
right? The
That's a big
fantasy of
one.
writing, oh my God, it's like
It's those
euphoric. And it's
Instagram
like,
reels we talked about
girl,
last time, right?
come
The
on, candles on
coffee and the
candles
candle and the yeah,
and
uh-huh.
tea,
Uh-huh.
with loose leaves and not store bought tea bags. You
Yeah.
are like soft girl life. And when it doesn't feel like that or look like that, because let me tell you, girl, when I get up and I'm writing and I got my bonnet on my head and I'm dragging, it's like, this is not cute. When people's like, well, just record what you do, girl. Do you know what recording what I do
You do
really?
not want to see that recording.
Girl, that is not pretty. It is not cute, okay? And she tried to keep it cute. Nah, I'm not trying to keep it cute. But the point is, so what happens is when the reality of it doesn't mirror or feel like the dream of it, you
Mhm.
think you've done something wrong. Or
Mhm.
you aren't, maybe I'm not cut out to do this.
Mhm.
Look, maybe this is not my ministry, right? This is against my constitution. Like, it'd be all the words. And but what it is, honestly, is like, this is what happens when you are showing up because you said yes, and it's just not easy anymore.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, and you're a wonderful example, and I mean, I've been there, not there now, but been there, right? It doesn't mean like you decide the answer is not I quit. The answer is I adjust
Yeah.
and I extend grace
Mhm.
and I figure out, well, what does this mean? And then you
Mhm.
can, once it's all done, sit back and look at it like, okay, how could I have done this differently?
Yeah.
Because if I want this to be a regular part of my life, that means that, you know what? We can't do a breakneck anymore. I'm in that like we
Mhm.
can't breakneck it anymore. So then
Yeah.
what that means, I just got to pick projects I really feel good about and that I
Mhm.
really want to do,
Mhm.
and because I only have so much time because it's the
Yeah.
season that I'm in. And I think because of the season I'm in, I'm evaluating that more and I can appreciate that more. Because I thought I was gonna be able to write all the books. My kids are gone. I got more
Yeah.
time. Lies you tell. It's not like that. I'm just like, it's just not like that. And it doesn't make it bad, but I think it can make it feel like you're doing something wrong if you have the
Hmm.
wrong sort of expectation. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it all sort of it hits the thing of like, okay, maybe my expectation is off. And if I still want to do this, do I still want to do this? Yes, I want to do this. Okay. So what does that look like? And so it's become being more intentional about my schedule,
Yeah.
more intentional about having my writing blocks, more
Hmm.
intentional about when it's writing times is just for writing, and everything else, students, blah 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 blah, gotta wait.
Hmm.
And a lot of times you don't know that if you don't go past that threshold and have to
Yeah.
snap back and say,
Hmm.
okay, I'm not doing that no more.
Hmm.
Okay, what does it look like now? And what will
Yeah.
happen is, will you be challenged again? Of course. But
Yeah.
all of it, if you let it, becomes tools that are in your toolbox that you can
Yeah.
access at any time. And I'm not necessarily in the snapback, but I'm in the it's just I just gotta let it be what it is because I'm aiming to have this first draft done by the end of this month. Girl. All I can say is, ooh, child. And I don't know what that means, but it's just, that's all I got. It's all I got. It's all I got. And I feel like it is so odd because if I was writing a novel, it would feel so different. But since
Yeah.
I'm not, I just had to realize, like, Dana, it's because it's new.
Yeah.
Like
It's.
I've worked on nonfiction projects. I've ghostwritten nonfiction projects,
Mhm.
but it's something different when you are aiming to interpret your words, and it's words I've had for a long time, and I have all these transcripts, and then there's some days I don't even want to look at the transcripts. And
Mhm.
girl, and I have a little bit of rebellious in me,
Yeah.
so I have to deal with that too. So
And
yeah.
it's so much like the conversation we had last week, right? About like the same way that you sort of like you hit like all his lost moments. You're gonna like it's not because you're doing something wrong, it's because it's just how this thing goes. I do Pilates regularly and I have a favorite instructor who is like I always do classes with. And one of the things she says is, so Pilates is a lot of compound movements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're working different parts at the same time, and so you're focusing on probably one particular muscle, but then you're going to feel it in other muscles because of the compound movement. And so she's really cute. She has a super sweet voice, and she'll say like, if you're feeling it in your triceps, then you're doing it right, like and it's just sort of like if you're feeling the burn, you're doing it right. And that's kind of like how I think about like these moments in the creative process is like if you're feeling the burn, right? If it doesn't look like soft girl or VSO girl or whatever the hell, trend is going on, that we're filtering writing life through, and you're feeling the drag, and it's 4:30 a.m. and you're like, what am I here? And you're like bedraggled and in your sweatpants with your coffee, and you're like, ugh. Like if you're feeling the burn, you're doing it right? But then, and it's the same thing of like if you overextend yourself, you recognize that, and then you use that to calibrate yourself and find, okay, what is the right amount of burn without going to injury, right? Like how do I
Mm-hmm.
challenge myself but don't push myself to injury? Sometimes you learn that stuff the hard way. And better to do it in your creativity than in your workout, I'll just say that.
Listen, and girl, when you talk about your instructor saying that, that's why I don't like doing exercise with an instructor. Because, baby, when I get tired, look, you may get my hood side. I be like, listen, I be ready to fight. Anybody ask you about no burn? Girl, I do not do group exercises for that very reason. Because people will be asking me, Dana, did you? Because I will walk out. Listen, I do not do well under pressure. That's why it's so funny that
I'll
I'm in the
tell you where you
preventive
can stick
trainer.
that burn, ma'am.
Listen,
I will tell you.
I would tell you and everybody else in here, and anybody else that wants something can get it. That's and they'd be like, "Ma'am, this is not how this works. That's not how any of this works." So I will, for real, and that's what's so bad. But no, I get it, and I think, but I love that we're talking about this. I love that we're talking about this in a sense that it's not always the glamorous part, but it is the part that helps you to see the version of yourself that finishes things.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
and I like I've been saying this to myself a lot of like I can do hard things, right? I
Yeah.
can do hard things. And also, the reality is, we're so used to seeing the other side of it that now you're
Yes.
understanding and experiencing what it means to go through it. And can you imagine, like, the kind of coach and editor you are now
Mm-hmm.
because you have? It's not that you didn't appreciate it before,
Mm-hmm.
but now you have a different level of understanding, and it is it in itself is like a nurturing process. It's sort of like the pruning process that you read about, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
pruning process of that. It causes you to create better. It
Yeah.
causes you to show up better. It causes you to support better. And it causes you, if you allow it to be more articulate when it comes to vocalizing when you need help and support
Yeah.
because of it. And so it's like it's something that you would rather not have experienced, but since
Yeah.
you have, milk it.
Yes.
Like,
Might as well make it work for you.
listen, look at me, milk it. Listen. And it is so bad, but it's so true. Yes. And just use it, and it just, I think it just, professionally, think it gives you another layer of, girl, I don't have words for it. It just like, when somebody comes,
Yeah.
like, all right, I got you. All right, what's going on? Because you could see it all on
Yeah.
their face. You could hear it in the language.
Mm-hmm.
You can read through the email and read through the messages, and you can talk
Yeah.
somebody down and be like, okay, it's all right. Be quiet, because
Yeah.
you could come back from this.
Mm-hmm.
You also know, like, when you start seeing the signs of it, you don't know and
Yeah.
recognize it because you don't know what it is until you know. And when you know, you know. So,
Yeah.
with that said, y'all, this is our catching up. But basically, if you are in the middle of it, keep swimming. Just keep swimming, like Doris said.
If you're feeling the burn, then you're doing it right.
And it's okay to punch her. No, this way. Don't punch your instructor. We don't agree with that. But no, if she did say that in life, in jokes and giggles and grins, I would still probably be ready to strangle her. Be like, I don't want to hear that. Well, listen. That's like what one of my coaches, she said. I was like, dang, I paid her. She be like, you know what you was signing up for? Actually, no, I did not know.
False. I did not. Excuse me.
Girl, she just looked at me. I said, no, I didn't. Because if I would have known.
Now that I'm here, I guess I'll keep going forward.
Exactly. But just for the record, no, I didn't. Listen, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it either. But no, but it is. It's you. If you're hearing it and you're in the thick of it, keep going. Like,
Yeah.
you don't ever. This is why people don't, and you
Yeah.
can prove to yourself that you are the one that does.
Yeah.
And that's it. Point blank. Period. So with that said, we are about to dive into this conversation about characters from Sin and Magic, which is the second book in the Demigods of San Francisco book or series by K.F. Breene. And if you are new around here, welcome. If not, you may have remember that we did book one. And so this is one of our book twos for this year that we are looking at. And so that's, if you listened to last week, which was us talking about the plot of how being a book two, we believe, sort of affected that story.
Mm-hmm.
It's of course going to carry over into us talking about the characters. And since this is a what we call our like hybrid pick, I wonder if you still think it's a hybrid pick. But since this is our hybrid pick, do you still think of this as a hybrid pick now that you've read it?
It feels like it. The only reason it feels like a hybrid is because it's like fantasy. It has like world building and fantasy elements. It feels more like a Dana pick than a hybrid pick. I think.
Really?
Like
Because
I
you
think
don't
it
count the
leans
part
Dana.
that I would have. Well, I think it leans Dana, but I think it has many of the elements that you like in it. It's just a softer version to me.
Well, and I think it was like because it was softened though, it lost its impact for me. So it didn't hit the same way that like that I was hoping that it would. So you're like, oh, I think you're going to like it. It's got a little more action. We're sort of like on the hunt, we're chasing something down and we're piecing together information. And I love that in a book, but because it was kind of blunted a little bit, it meant that it didn't have the impact that I was hoping for.
I'm gonna get you either a hat or some glasses or something so that when you put them on, we just want you to be a regular person. You can't be extra smart.
I am a regular. There are readers like me out in the world.
Readers like you out in the world that would not be on this podcast with me. Listen, I be telling Rachel. I
think she just insulted me, ladies and
no,
gentlemen.
Rachel, you have this, y'all. This is why I always be telling Rachel to go for the dusty old. No, she don't do dusty old books, but it always sounds more dramatic for me to say it that way.
Books.
You do. But I think what this has been a very interesting tale of audience and of genre and of, I think, maybe lends a little bit of like perspective. So I still think it would have been, but I get what you're saying. I just feel like you have to, when you see that it says demigods of San Francisco, and we see that this woman is running around trying to find this man's mama's spirit to push her over, that should already just tell you the level that we are entering at. It should. I think
this does feel like, again, it's like, man, if it were grittier, I would have been all over it. But because
then it wouldn't have been this.
I know, that's it, right? But it's like it is the question of like audience, and we've had this. I'll just make this quick mention before as well. We've had this conversation before. I don't remember which episode. We probably had it half a dozen times, but right. Again, just like you said, the difference between like genre and audience expectations. Because one of the things you've talked about, right, is like romance readers, they know what they want out of the book, right? Like it's like, and this is something that people get mixed up when they read a romance and then they're like, hey, this was just like that other book. And it's like, yeah, that's on purpose. That is by design. Versus, again, if you look at like fantasy, if you get a fantasy reader and they're like, hey, this is like the other book, the people are rioting, right? They're like, hey, we've seen this book before. And then like we've had like whole sort of controversies is too strong of a word, I think, but like, whole like kind of like upsets in the community of like, this book is just a budget version of this other book, and that's a bad thing, right? Versus like in romance, it's like, no, that's exactly what I asked for. That's what I wanted. And the way that impacts the genre landscape, I think, as a whole, right? And like what readers are expecting and how authors show up to those particular spaces as well. And so there is a little bit of that, like where I'll be like, what? Nobody got hurt. What happened? Why? And it's like, that is not, this is what, no, this is for Rachel. Sit down, and that's how we wind up in these
Put your regular reader hat on, please, Rachel. That's what we're going to say. Do you have on your regular reader hat, Rachel? But with that said, we're going to talk about characters in Sin and Magic.
Well, let me go ahead and start us off with a summary. And,
oh, yeah, that's right.
And then we'll hit our high level points. Got you. All right. Sin and Magic is book 2 in K.F. Breene's Demigods of San Francisco series, where broke, hidden necromancer Alexis has just made the worst, best decision of her life. She's agreed to work for Kieran, a dangerously powerful demigod, to find and free his mother's trapped spirit before his vengeful father discovers their plan and kills them all. With the help of wildcard necromancer Brea, a fiercely loyal inner circle, and the 2 teens she's sworn to protect, Alexis is learning to wield terrifying new magic while navigating a San Francisco ruled by gods, demigods, and ghosts who all want something from her. It's a slow burn paranormal romance threaded through with found family, secret missions, and an off-the-page villain whose shadow shapes every choice the characters make.
She having too much fun. Okay.
Listen, I already told you about how well I'm doing as a person and just struggling. We're just gonna make the most out of everything we got here. So high level points that we'll talk about. as the same with Sin and Chocolate, I want to take some time to talk about the cast, and particularly again, we're looking at this specifically through the lens of a book two, and how KF Breene like introduce, like she expands the cast out, but she really budgets it very well, the amount of cast that we're getting in each book, so that we get really connected to a few people at a time, which really the way that she does this really effectively. So I really want to talk about sort of that choice and how she does that to make us to be able to keep building the cast out without us being like, I'm sorry, who is that? Where? Who? What did they do? Which is really easy to do when you have a cast as big as the one she's working with. Um, and then, similar to what we talked about in plot, I just want to talk a little bit about Lexi and Kieran's internal arcs. And again, the way that this, as being a part of a 6-book series, how we sort of manage character arcs the same way that we kind of have to manage external arcs, and doing things in sort of like smaller steps, one book at a time, because we're spreading it out over the course of basically 2 trilogies, right? And then lastly, I just want to kind of like touch on the fact that like she's doing a really nice job of from book 1 to book 2, and then you've mentioned to me before that in book 3, the role that the wards play, which I think is really great. We talked about this in Before I Let Go, the last book that we did on the podcast. It's just a really nice job of making the wards real people with real lives, and not just sort of like relegating them to like they're the teens who live at home and they're comedic relief and they don't do anything. Like they're just there, like they're just there to be interesting and plot motivators, which is easy to do with kids. Like it's really easy for kids to kind of get like relegated to that kind of role in a story. So to give them kind of their own trajectory, I think is a really strong choice that makes this book better, and also sets up promises that the reader is going to be excited about for the series. So those are my 3 sort of like overarching points. What do you want to make sure we talk about today?
I think, well, mine sort of piggybacks on yours. Well, I guess a little bit. The first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was that that the protagonists are sort of evolving. So Kieran and Alexis are evolving in opposite but complementary ways.
Mm-hmm.
You see that she's growing in her power, and he's also learning the limits of his power, and we are learning about what that means with them together as well. So I think that's really interesting, and I told you this before, and I'm sure I probably mentioned it on here. I think that's one of the things that we see a lot in like classics like Pride and Prejudice, of how characters sort of evolve in different timelines, even though they end up at the same place. And this is not something you see a lot of, but it does bring a lot of, I think it can bring a sense of natural conflict, even if especially if it feels like a little bit on the low stakes side. So I think it's a great thing here. The other thing that I love, and I don't have a way to put it, but it is something that we experience, that is normally kind of looked at as like a power imbalance between Alexis and Kieran. I mean, he's her boss. And on top of the fact that he's her boss, he's the one paying her, he's also a demigod. And to her, she's sort of like a low level, regular person, but she's not. And so here, I think it's one of those really interesting ways to see him in this position. Yes, about the power imbalance, but it's handled in a way that it's not always done in romance. Like we see that, and that's usually a draw for readers. But here, I feel like we see him being positioned as an alpha, but he's not. Like he can be overbearing, but it's in a way because he wants to be with her, but it doesn't feel like almost like the icky way, like you're like abuse of power kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see that he does it in a way that of how he shows up, how he keeps his promises, how he's protecting her and the kids. Like we are seeing that, and it helps us, especially here, because we realize that um, there's a lot of things that he could be doing because he's a demigod that he's not doing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this book, like I said in our episode last week, I think it shows us how we're seeing them in this book through their relationships. We're seeing who they are. It's like a physical manifestation of show versus tell, of how they're really showing up in this story. and and there's a couple things, and I'll say one more thing that sort of piggybacks on that, of like, I really feel like it sort of shows here in his sense of like his capacity in the relational aspect. And I also think it helps us to see why book 2 in this way is necessary, and we could talk more about that. And then the final thing that I have, which you kind of already touched on in your talk of like budgeting the cast and secondary characters, I think this is just like the perfect version of a found family. I love a good found family.
Yeah.
And so we see it from both of their sides, and the fact that it's just it's like opening up their circle just
Mhm.
makes it even better. It's like her in her wards, and essentially we are seeing her as a parent, right? She took
Yeah.
over care of them because of her mother being gone. And then we see Kieran in his six, in his capacity, and how they're sort of opening their circle to bring them in, but also Lexi in her wards, like all of them crammed in her little kitchen, and
Yeah.
everybody's, it's just like perfect. So and then I think because of this, we continue to see this progression of a collective choice,
Hmm.
and that is
Yeah.
being done over and over again. And I think it's like a subtle escalation, but it's one
Hmm.
of those escalations that are sort of felt through the emotional storyline more than it is said. But it is one of those things that I think hooks readers in a way that you can't write with words. You just have to
Yeah.
demonstrate it. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, those are the things. So with
Perfect.
so with that said, go ahead, and I think you can kick us off, and I'll kind of piggyback because they're really close. I will
Yeah.
go in order with you, but I think we'll land at the same place.
Yeah, well, and I figured because you kind of already started talking, like we sort of, your point ended on talking about the cast, so we'll just go
Yeah,
ahead and start there.
go there. Yeah.
So one of the things, like, and this is what I really, I think one of KF Breed's strengths in this series is her cast, right? So the in the first book, we spend most of our time getting to know Kieran, Lexi, Mordecai, and Daisy. Mordecai and Daisy being her wards. And that's where we kind of spend. And we also get to know Frank a little bit. We start to kind of get a feel just for who he is and what kind of individual he is. And um, and so we spent that whole first book kind of just really getting connected to those people. So by the time we show up to the second book, we are already invested. We like Lexi, we like Kieran, and we love Daisy and Mordecai, right? Like they are just the perfect sort of counterbalancing force to Lexi, and they're kind of this lovely exercise in contrast, which is a really, by the way, a really good thing you want to look for in a cast. You really want contrasting characteristics so that they have a way to sort of like they have something to kind of like bounce off of each other on, right? So like Lexi is a little bit irresponsible and can be kind of half baked in terms of her like her ideas or the way she's problem solving, and Mordecai is a teenager and he's much more like sensible than almost anybody else in the room, just generally, maybe except for Kieran. And so you're looking for those kind of competing characteristics because that the way that informs relationships is what endears us to characters. And so something that she does so well, so we already have them established, we already like them, we already love their kind of dynamic. In this book, she adds a few more people. But what I think is important is like we don't get all of Kieran's six, where we just get a bunch of buff dudes dumped into the story and we can't tell them apart. Instead, we get primarily Bria, right? She's kind of the main character, the main secondary character that we kind of spend the most time with and get to know. And she sort of adds this, she's very much this kind of like wild card character. And then we get to know Jack a little bit, we get to know Zorn a little bit. It's really only three characters that we are really spending any secondary characters that we're spending any significant amount of time in. And what that does is it gives her time to actually build out those dynamics and to acquaint us with each of the characters deeply enough that we don't just like, it's not just that we care about them, but also again from a purely pragmatic standpoint that we recognize them. Because if she dumped all of Kieran's six in this book, it would be so easy to be like, which one is that? Sorry, who is he? What does he do again? But we don't have that at all. And so she really, like, she builds out that cast and builds out that found family and that found family dynamic a little bit at a time, so that with the next book, I don't know who we're going to meet, but I can't wait to find out, and I can't wait to see what they add to the mix, right? And so it becomes this sort of wonderful kind of like mixing pot or like stew of characters who are all kind of occupying the same space and bumping into each other kind of in all the best ways and creating the whole dynamic for the found family. And when you have 6 books, I think that she leverages that really well to
Exactly.
say, I am going to take my time here, where I'm not going to try to get you all in on all the characters all at once. We got 6 books, settle in. And so we get to know, right? We kind of go deep with the characters we have in each book, so that way we can add the next ones and go deep with those, add the next one and go deep with those. And the effect or the result is very effective, because now we know who the characters are, they're distinct to us, and we care about them. And then again, we add new ones in, and we're excited to see the dynamic expand, rather than being overwhelmed by, who are you? I don't know which one you are, you know?
Hmm. I totally agree. I also think it's an opportunity to kind of like, if you think about the concentric circles, right? It sort of like makes the world bigger when you add more people to it and see how they relate and what they bring in almost from the outside world that causes their world in reality to expand, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of increasing their count. And part of this is like the continuation of there being this sort of what I'm calling like a collective choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a choice that's happening. And again, because this book too is expanding that world, there was the original choice with Lexi to accept the job with Kieran to
Mm-hmm.
help with his mom. But because of that choice that brought on his first 6 that sort of started cooking for them and, doing these things. And then the choice becomes for her wards once they realize what they have to begin training with them. And the 6 becomes invested in the family. And you begin to see um Mordecai and Daisy all leveling up, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you add in Bria, who's helping Lexi learn her skills because she's a necromancer as well. What I love, love, love about this is it really is a great demonstration of how every character that you introduce must have their own goal state,
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
goal state is contributing again to that collective choice.
Yeah.
And every time that collective choice in this story is being made, it increases the stakes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the more people you cannot have, because Bria is not one of the 6, and Kyrian is in addition to. So that's 7 plus 3 more people plus Bria. You are not going to have 11 people doing a thing and not be noticed. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just the dynamics of that. And then it also allows you to do something that she continues to escalate, which is to bring in more of the world building aspects through character.
Mm-hmm.
How Mordecai is a shifter, Daisy is human,
Mm-hmm.
Alexis is necromancer, Kieran is a demigod, Jack is a oh, I can't remember if it
He's a
was in book 2 or 3.
shapeshifter as well.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say what he shape shifts into, but I was couldn't remember which book it is. So the point is, and then each one of them, as you continue, you're getting more and more um into what they bring to the table. And what I find so fascinating, because she just does a great job of writing this, Lexi don't care as long as her kids are okay, and as long as they are not being taken advantage of. Because
Yeah.
there's many times when she's like, "You didn't ask what their abilities were." No, I
Yeah.
didn't know. And it just becomes
Yeah.
the running thing. It's almost like, girl, learn how to read the room other than the ghosts. And so it does, it turns into this great opportunity for, for there to be an escalation of stakes. But an escalation of stakes also means that it increases the cost to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just the cost, if it was just her, is something different than the cost if it's her in her wards, right? Or
Yeah.
the cost is more to him if it was just him, than
Mm-hmm.
if it's him and his six, and him his six and her, and him his six and her kids, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what's it worth to you? And I think
Yeah.
this story is particularly in this book, that's an understated cost,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like you're blaring it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you sit back and look at it in the totality of the story in general, it is a huge cost. And it's a great way for you to sort of bake in, because the reality is that sort of soft cost, it's not a soft cost, but right, this sort of soft cost and soft existence is hooking us right in the heart, because we
Mm-hmm.
care what happens to Mordecai, and we
Yeah.
care about what happens to Daisy, and we care about the six that care about him. And it tells us a lot about him and the leader that he is, even if he questions it, because they
Mm-hmm.
trust him implicitly.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is how you build it. Sort of reminds us of when we had our discussion of Mistborn, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
build this, it's its own level of a thing based on the
Yeah.
bond that you create with your secondary characters. And here it's done very intentionally and
Yeah.
beautifully. I will add to that because it sort of piggybacks into one of my I guess one of my other sort of things. I was talking about the protagonists and sort of how they're evolving in opposites and how it complements each other as far
Yeah.
as a romantic relationship, because it's romance, but it's done with the secondary characters too,
Yeah.
right? How they bring this thing, and it's not about Kyrian. And really what this says, it's like it's not about Kyrian, which tells us that Kyrian is a team player,
Yeah.
right? So when he's doubting and he's wondering, this is my father, like, can my love for her turn into the love that my dad had for my mom? We
Yeah.
already, as a reader, know no, because
Yeah.
look at the people that follow you, that will follow
Yeah.
you wherever it is that you go, even if it means going against a demigod
Mm-hmm.
and knowing the stakes that you are. It is a life or death stake. And I think she does such a beautiful job of painting a life or death stake in a way that still, I don't know if we feel the full blows of it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that that is an intentional choice later.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it feel like have a cozy kind of feel to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a huge stake, because even though we haven't fully said it and we sort of are hinting at it, it is a
Mm-hmm.
life or death stake for all of them.
Yeah.
Everybody. Mordecai, we know because of his pack dynamics and the fact that he was supposed to have been dead and not alive. Daisy, because
Mm-hmm.
she's not even supposed to be in the magical zone
Yeah.
or anywhere near it. And it is used as a strength and not as a weakness. And it begins to be this way that she evolves. And
Mm-hmm.
Lexi, because she's promised her mom she's going to take care of these kids, and these are
Mm-hmm.
her kids, even if she continues to call them warts. This is Mama Bear spirit all over
Yeah.
this thing.
Yeah.
And baby, when I tell you, when they get ready to mess with them babies, listen, she don't care what magic. She gonna rip out your soul. She gonna rip out your weave. She gonna do all the things if it means that she gonna protect her kids.
Yeah.
And we see that Karen feels the same way about them,
Yeah.
right? And so I think this is such a great display of character. And so with that said,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of pulls in my other point, which is we see those protagonists evolving. We see them evolving in a way where her power is starting to, I don't necessarily want to say it's starting to strengthen it, except for in some ways it is. But really, I think what we're seeing is that she had the ability, but she didn't have the name for it. And
Yeah.
she didn't understand that she was doing this thing that had a greater um, impact
Mm-hmm.
until she now is able to define, oh, that's what I was doing. And
Right.
now begin to realize, well, what does it mean when I do it intentionally?
Yeah.
And we see her growing in that and growing in it in a way that has nothing to do with him, but everything to do with him. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when the romance really sings.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, so I feel like a lot of my things are sort of in I guess to wrap minds with the bow, it all kind of comes down then to I think in this story a lot of times of seeing like Kieran in this alpha role,
Mm-hmm.
in his alpha role with all of that, the management of this
Mm-hmm.
relationship, or not relationship, not friends with benefits, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
and with the six. But what it does, I feel like, to um, have my point sort of hook what we talked about last week, I think this book shows how necessary this book is. And
Hmm.
I think when people do book twos, I will just tap dance on this a little bit and then I'll back away because we maybe need to bring it somewhere else. But I think you have a choice when you have a book two, right?
Hmm.
You have a choice. Like sometimes what people will do is they'll use a book two to be sort of like the foundation of how we got here, right? If you think back, like you'll have a lot of flashbacks, or you'll start having a lot of like
Hmm.
history of how we got here, or you'll
Interesting.
start getting right, like really think about book twos. Like a lot of times you'll have that. You'll even find and sometimes it drives me mad that there are a lot of flashbacks or even chapters done from before so that we
Yeah.
get an understanding of how we got here, because what it does is it begins, in my opinion, and my professional opinion, it begins to shape the context of the stakes.
Hmm.
We already got them in. Now we're
Hmm.
trying to help you to understand of why it is that you should care about this and what the
Hmm.
cost is.
Hmm.
And I think here we see it, but she does it in a forward moving way
Yeah.
versus a looking back kind of way.
Yeah.
And so I think what it shows here is like why this book was necessary. And I
Yeah.
think this book was necessary here, yes, so that Lexi can have the opportunity to grow in her powers and her ability outside of Kyrian, because she
Hmm.
needs that. That's his own form of autonomy and
Hmm.
agency, but it's also to show that Kyrian is wrestling with the big elephant in the room, that this is my father. And
Hmm.
the fact that you have to find your mother to rescue her so she can rest peacefully, and that
Hmm.
it was at the hands of your father, means
Hmm.
that I have the predisposition to show up and love this same way. And I think it's a different
Yeah.
kind of wound. This is a
Yeah.
different kind of romantic wound. And
Yeah, for
so
sure.
here, what we're seeing is Kyrian's capacity to love through his actions in a
Hmm.
way that we see him in a way that he doesn't even fully see himself yet. But
Yeah.
we see him that way through how he treats Alexis,
Hmm.
how he treats her wards, how he treats his six. So even
Yeah.
if he doubts whether he'll be able to handle it well, we don't know what's going to happen. We got 4 more books to go. But how
Yeah.
he handles it, we have a level of confidence
Yeah.
that he is not his father
Hmm.
and that he will do better by, even even just because, even if it's just us seeing the fact that he wrestles with it. To wrestle
Hmm.
with something means that you have the capacity to
Yeah.
do better, right? In this, and so
Yeah.
I feel like that's what makes this necessary, and why I think it had to be sort of like stretched. I think that's the way you feel, stretched. I feel like it's like you're in a car and we're on cruise control, right? We're
Yeah.
getting to our destination. We're in Texas, so we go super fast. Okay, we go 80. But we see that, and I think that it's going to help us to maybe trust the process and trust that going forward, but we need it so that we can have the capacity to be able to experience the rest of it. And so I blurred all mine together.
Yeah, well, and I want to make a quick note because I know that I sort of like there were some moments in our previous episode in plot where I was just like, oh, I don't like to see a lot of near misses in a row because it feels to me like it starts to undermine the promise of the story. Like, will there be consequences to the protagonist's actions, or is it always going to be, whoops, that almost happened, good thing it didn't? And that's like that was my sort of like main objection there. But at no point did I read this book and think, oh, we don't, this book was superfluous, right? it was
Oh
it
yeah,
was the
no. Hmm.
bridge between, and I think that this is great because what you're saying, I'm like seeing that it's like, I see this functioning at the plot and the character level, right? Where
Hmm.
this book on both aspects, of, if I'm just thinking about like the external like external being the Valen's arc and whatever's going on
Hmm.
there, and then internal in terms of individual character arcs. And then of course the romance is really our main
Romance.
through line there. But I'm kind of looking at these two particular things, and that book two is creating the bridge between book one and three on both levels, right? So that search for his mother's skin and what it does at the plot level of, again, exposing us to, ooh, Valens is up to something and getting us involved and wanting to solve that problem. But then doing that at the internal level as well, where we sort of are bridging this gap between who they are in book one and whatever they're going to face down in book three, which again, you've read it and I haven't, so I don't know exactly what that is, but it is setting up for Kieran in particular, right, where he is starting to, we're seeing him ask that question of who is he going to become.
That's right.
He's seen who his dad is, and and again, he's seen the effect. It's not just like, oh, like I knew my dad was a little crazy or like a little twisted. It's like my mom can't go to the afterlife because this guy was so, and it's not just like, oh, my dad is a psychopath, right? It's not that simple exactly. It's who his dad was in love, right? Which again is going
Yes.
back to that romance through line of like, this is who my dad was to my mom and the way that he engaged that particular relationship. And so it's prompting as Kieran is actually experiencing the consequences of that, because he's like, now I have to find my mom's Selkie skin so that she could go to the afterlife. And I know that she's stuck here. And he's living in those consequences, right? Trying to resolve the consequences of a choice his dad made. It's putting him face to face with the question of he's falling for Lexi, and now he has to be like, am I going to be that guy? Right? And it's prompting that question that he starts to ask, as what I'm assuming will just sort of like continue through maybe another book or two. I'm not 100% sure. But it's setting up that internal arc of who he's going to be. But to your point, he has to find that out for himself. We as the audience, we're not thinking this story is going to end tragically and Kieran's going to be a monster, because he actually we watch him prove himself time and time again of the good leader that he is, of the compassionate person that he is. And so it kind of helps us to like root for Kieran because
That's
we
right.
know who he's capable of being, but we're watching him go through a very human experience of doubting who he can be or who he
Exactly.
might become. And so I think that right, again, as a book two, as moving us from book one where we kind of get introduced and really getting the plot kind of rolling in book two, this really like, again, it like springboards the primary trajectory of the story itself. And to your point, we're not looking backwards. And I think that you do that too much and it gets tiresome because we're like, okay, yeah, but I'm here now, like what are we doing now? And moving forward towards something versus just constantly looking over our shoulder at something behind us. But it is very much forward motion, bringing the story so that we're like, it is clear we are moving toward book three and we are moving towards something. And I think that this is really, again, both at that external and that internal level, really, really good at that.
Hmm. Hmm. And so that we can, I think we're sort of talking about this, and it actually piggybacks so that we can do this last point of the kids in their own, like her wards. I think we sort of
Yeah.
have already talked about that. I'd love to hear you talk about it because it grows, and I have theories as to why. Um, and so I'm looking forward to your comments, and then I'll tack on my thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I think one of the things, so again, I've already mentioned this, that it's really easy for kids to become set dressing where they're like comedic relief, or they're just sort of like there to be cute, or to again raise the stakes, and sometimes to like artificially inflate the stakes where it's like, oh no, they're kids, but they feel like they're just sort of like tacked on. I think I talked about this the last James Bond movie, the last Daniel Craig James Bond movie does this abominably, and you're like, I can feel that you are trying to cheat my feelings because there's a child on screen. this is low blow. Okay, no. And so, but it's easy because kids are naturally a raised stake, right? The instinct to protect the not just the people you care about, but when they're minors, right? And you're like, oh my god, like they do not deserve this world that's being thrown at them. Um, but what she does is we get so attached to them in the first book and we love their dynamic with Lexi, and it would almost be like a missed opportunity to not take advantage of that and bring them along for the ride, where they become just sort of these like satellites that are like, I guess they're going to school and living a normal life. Like if Lexi is your mom, normal life is like not on the table for you. It's just not how this is going to go for you. And so giving them the opportunity where we get to know them more while also seeing them, because they are also teenagers, right? So they are growing up and moving like toward adulthood as well. And so seeing them actually get to learn their own skills, right? And that they have different skills. So Daisy being human, she has but she has her own kind of particular gifts that are getting developed. And Mordecai, being a shifter, has very specific, different gifts than his human sister, right? And so, human adopted sister. And so, setting up, I think, too, the promise that like not only is this story going somewhere, but the wards get to play an active role in the overarching story, like that they won't just be sort of like tacked on, but we're actually going to get to see like Daisy be her awesome badass self, and see Mordecai like participate in the plot of the story and the goals of the story in their own meaningful ways. So they're no longer just the wards, but they're kind of like a full integrated part of this secondary cast and this found family who is binding together to pursue this goal. So they're not sort of like second class citizens in the plot, but they're actually sort of fully involved. And that makes us, again, it makes us like them more and sets up promises that we want to see fulfilled, of seeing how they're going to grow and what kinds of roles they're going to play.
And it does, it grows. The only thing, well, the thing that I would add there is that, like, everything that you do, you want it to give you double duty or more,
Yes.
right? And so we see that, and it adds a level of stakes, but it also is a motivator for Lexi, who is not motivated by money. She wasn't motivated by getting this job. She wasn't motivated by the fact that a demigod wanted her to work for him, right? She's not motivated by any of that. And so and you see that continue. And I think it's great. First of all, they are great comic relief.
Yeah.
And they bring out a different side of her. And it also
Hmm.
lets her be serious and grow, but at the same time be able to have that comedic relief,
Hmm.
so that she doesn't have to be so serious all the time, right? And know
Yeah.
all of the things, because that just would have made probably her annoying. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I love it. And I love how they continue to grow, and how it's both a motivating factor for her, and it's a fear, right?
Hmm.
It's a fear that you want to protect your kids and make sure that they're okay. And she promised her mom, and now, here they are embarking on taking down a demigod. I
Yeah.
mean, so overall, yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's a great, and they continue to evolve in this story.
Yeah.
Are there any other points that you want us to cover before we close out? Because I think we covered everything.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah. Everything that's on my list, I got through all my points. So I think we had this is a really good discussion of really digging into, again, I think characters are really one of KF Breen's strong suits. So it's
Mhm.
really fun to kind of get to dig into that a little bit deeper and see the way that it interacts with the plot as well. And again, how you think about, because like a book two isn't just like, you're not just sort of having to think about it in terms of plot, but you do have to think about it in terms of character as well. And I think she does that really well in this book. So I said my
Yeah.
piece. Let's see.
And the last thing that when you say that, as you were saying that, it made me think about, how much I love the Fast and Furious franchise. Like, I love it. I love it. I love it. And it makes me, even though, you don't buy the heist thing. But I think the part of this story that borrows from that is how you're pulling together this cast that brings very unique skill sets
Yeah.
to this fight.
Mm-hmm.
Even Alexis, right? And
Yeah.
even Kieran, like he couldn't have done this without his six. And he now is at the place where he can't do this without her, or well, at least that's what we're hoping. And
Yeah.
so I think that is something to think about. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
about balancing your cast of characters and everyone having something that they're contributing. And when you
Mm-hmm.
have a cast that's this big, since we're talking about characters,
Yeah.
it could get very murky fast.
Yes.
And you need it to sort of be very clear.
Yeah.
And she did a really great job at that, especially because this book really isn't that long. It's a long one, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not as long as others. And it
No,
could have
it's
been.
yeah, she had to squeeze a lot. I think the total was like 10 or 11 hours on audiobook,
Yeah.
which is like I mean, our next book is going to be a standalone and it's 17 hours. So like she was logging a lot, like she had to do a lot in a very short amount of time.
And she did that. Okay. So, with that said, y'all, that is a wrap on us talking about characters from Sin and Magic by K.F. Breene. As you can see, we could have talked about this endlessly, but I think this episode has been a great pairing with what we discussed in plot. I mean, in general, it does, but I think in this particular case, because it is sort of intertwined, I say that every time, so I'll just stop there. So, since it's intertwined. So, with that said, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to thumbs up our video and subscribe to our podcast or wherever you are experiencing this, whether it's in audio or in video. And if you have any questions, you can visit us online at storydeepdive.com. With that said, we are out. We will see you in our next episode where we will kind of bring this all together and talk about our editors' takes, even though we've sort of hinted at some of them along the way. We will kind of dive in and talk about the good, bad, and the magical in the next episode.
Nice.
So, have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you really soon. Take care, and as always, happy writing. Goodbye.